The ground beneath your feet holds a secret that modern science is still struggling to reconcile with the established timeline of human history. Every year, we build higher and reach further into the stars, yet we remain curiously disconnected from the colossal foundations laid by those who came before us. There is a tension in the soil, a conflict between the world we are told exists and the physical remnants that suggest something far more imposing once walked the earth. We are taught that civilization is a steady climb from primitive tools to digital dominance, but when you stand before stones weighing over 800 tons, moved and placed with surgical precision, that narrative begins to fracture. The risk of looking too closely at these relics is not just a matter of academic disagreement, it is the realization that our ancestors might have shared the world with a shadow of humanity that we were never meant to remember. In the oldest layers of our collective memory, preserved in texts that have survived the collapse of empires, there are recurring mentions of a race that defied the natural order. The Book of Genesis and the ancient Book of Enoch speak of the Nephilim, the fallen ones, the giants of old, men of renown. They were described not merely as tall humans, but as something fundamentally different, born of a union that bridged the gap between the earthly and the divine. For centuries, these accounts were treated as pure allegory, moral lessons wrapped in the skin of mythology. However, as we peel back the layers of the earth, the line between myth and material reality becomes increasingly blurred. We find ourselves staring at structures that challenge the very laws of physics as we understood them in the pre-industrial era, leaving us to wonder if the legends were actually eyewitness accounts. Consider the megalithic complexes found across the globe, from the windswept heights of the Andes to the sun-scorched plains of the Levant. At Baalbek in modern-day Lebanon, the Temple of Jupiter sits atop a foundation composed of stones that defy explanation. These are the trilithon, three massive blocks of limestone, each weighing an estimated 800 tons. Even with the most advanced modern cranes, moving stones of this magnitude across rugged terrain and placing them with such accuracy is a logistical nightmare. There are no signs of the wooden rollers or hemp ropes that traditional archaeology suggests were used. Instead, there is only the silence of the stones themselves, suggesting a level of engineering capability that seems out of place for the era of their construction. If these were not built by the hands of men as we know them, then whose hands were they? The conflict deepens when we look at the historical records of the 19th and early 20th centuries. During the expansion of the United States, as settlers moved across the Ohio River Valley and into the heart of the American continent, they encountered thousands of mysterious earthworks and burial mounds. Local newspapers from that era are filled with accounts of amateur archaeologists and farmers uncovering skeletons of extraordinary proportions. These reports, often documented by local doctors and magistrates, described remains ranging from 7 to 12 feet in height, often possessing unique anatomical features like double rows of teeth or elongated craniums. These were not isolated incidents, they were a widespread phenomenon that sparked a national fascination with a lost race of mound builders. Yet, as quickly as these discoveries were reported, they seemed to vanish from the public record. In the modern era, you will find very few of these remains in the displays of major museums. This leads to a troubling question of preservation versus narrative. When an artifact is found that contradicts the current understanding of human evolution, where does it go? There are numerous accounts of specimens being sent to major institutions for further study, only for the paper trail to go cold. This is not necessarily evidence of a coordinated effort to deceive, but it does highlight a systemic tendency to prioritize data that fits within the existing framework while sidelining anomalies that are too difficult to categorize. The risk of acknowledging these relics is the risk of having to rewrite every textbook on the shelf. The Nephilim mystery is not confined to the West. In the ancient myths of the Sumerians, the Anunnaki are described as tall beings who descended to Earth and established the first cities. Their kings were said to have reigned for thousands of years, and their physical presence was documented in stone reliefs that show them towering over their subjects. In the Pacific, the island of Pohnpei holds the ruins of Nan Madol, a city built of massive basalt columns stacked like logs. Local legend insists the stones were flown into place by powerful sorcerers. While we may dismiss the supernatural elements of these stories, we cannot dismiss the physical reality of the stones. The sheer scale of the labor required to build such a site, in such a remote location, suggests a society with resources and a physical workforce that exceeds the historical estimates for that region. When we talk about the dark thriller of our history, the thrill comes from the realization that we are living on the ruins of a much larger world. The Nephilim relics represent a bridge to a past that was more complex, and perhaps more terrifying, than we are comfortable admitting. These were not just taller people, they were potentially a different branch of the human story, one that possessed a deep understanding of resonance, geology, and perhaps even the forces of gravity. The conflict arises when we try to reconcile their existence with our modern identity. If they were real, why did they disappear? Was it a natural catastrophe, a biological failure, or a conflict with the smaller, more numerous humans who eventually inherited the Earth? The disappearance of these giants is as much a mystery as their presence. Some theories suggest that as the climate shifted at the end of the last ice age, the resources required to sustain such massive bodies became scarce. Others point to the ancient texts which describe a great flood, a cleansing of the earth to remove the Nephilim and their influence. Regardless of the cause, the remnants they left behind are persistent. We see them in the perfectly fitted stone walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where the blocks are so tightly joined that a blade of grass cannot pass between them. We see them in the massive stone jars of Laos and the statues of Easter Island. These are the out-of-place artifacts that continue to haunt the periphery of science. The tension between the amateur researcher and the academic establishment is where the drama of the Nephilim truly lives. For the enthusiast, every oversized femur or giant stone circle is a smoking gun. For the academic, these are often seen as misinterpretations of natural formations or the result of human ingenuity pushed to its limits. But there is a middle ground that is far more unsettling. What if the truth is a mosaic, where some pieces have been lost, some have been hidden, and some are staring us in the face, but we lack the perspective to see them? The fear is not that we are being lied to, but that we have become blind to the evidence because it doesn't fit the scale of our current world. As we move deeper into the 21st century, new technologies are allowing us to look beneath the earth without ever picking up a shovel. Ground-penetrating radar and Lidar are revealing sprawling urban complexes hidden beneath the jungle canopies of Central America and the Amazon basin. We are finding that the ancient world was far more populated and far more technologically integrated than we ever imagined. In these hidden cities, the proportions of the architecture often suggest a scale that is intimidating to the modern human. High ceilings, massive doorways, and steps that require a giant's stride all hint at a population that lived large in every sense of the word. Imagine walking through a hall where the door handles are level with your eyes and the stairs are each as high as a man's chest. This is not the architecture of our ancestors, it is the architecture of a different species. The mystery of the Nephilim also intersects with our understanding of genetics. In recent years, the sequencing of ancient DNA has revealed that modern humans carry the genetic markers of several ghost lineages, hominid groups that we know existed through our blood, but for whom we have very little fossil evidence. While science currently identifies these as Neanderthals or Denisovans, the door is now open to the possibility that other, even more distinct groups once walked alongside us. Could the Nephilim be one of these lost branches? Could the men of renown be a biological reality that was eventually bred out of existence or pushed to the remote corners of the world until they became nothing more than shadows and stories? The risk of pursuing this path of inquiry is that it leads us into a dark forest of uncertainty. It forces us to confront the fragility of our own dominance. If a race of giants, builders of the world's most enduring monuments, could vanish so completely that their very existence is questioned, then what does that say about the permanence of our own civilization? We build with steel and glass, materials that will crumble into dust in a few thousand years. The Nephilim built with the bones of the earth, using stones that will last for eons. Their relics are a silent challenge, a reminder that the peak of human achievement might actually be in our rearview mirror. In the end, the story of the Nephilim is not just about bones and stones. It is about the conflict between our desire for a neat, orderly past and the messy, colossal reality of what we find when we dig. It is a thriller because it involves missing evidence, unexplained phenomena, and the lingering sense that the world is much older and much stranger than we have been led to believe. The skeletons may have vanished from the museum shelves, but the megaliths remain. They sit in the sun, indifferent to our theories, waiting for a generation that is brave enough to look at them and see the truth. The darkness of this thriller lies in the silence of the records. It is found in the dusty archives of 19th-century newspapers that spoke of giants as a matter of fact, only for that fact to be scrubbed from the collective consciousness within a few generations. It is found in the anomalous weight of a limestone block in Lebanon and the impossible precision of a granite sarcophagus in Egypt. We are left to piece together a puzzle where half the pieces are missing and the other half are too large to fit into the frame. But the search continues, driven by an innate human need to know where we came from and who else shared the journey. As we look toward the future, the relics of the Nephilim remain as a haunting presence in our landscape. They are a testament to a time when the world was a place of mythic proportions, where the line between the human and the extraordinary was thin. Whether they were the offspring of fallen angels or a biological anomaly of a forgotten era, their legacy is written in the stone of the earth itself. The conflict between discovery and denial will continue, but the stones do not lie. They stand as monuments to a history that is waiting to be reclaimed, a history that reminds us that there were giants in the earth in those days, and their shadows still fall across our world today. To walk among these megaliths is to feel a sense of profound insignificance. It is to realize that our modern tools are merely toys compared to the forces that move these mountains. The danger is not in the discovery itself, but in what the discovery implies about our place in the universe. If we are not the first great civilization, and if we are not the most physically or technologically capable, then we must redefine what it means to be human. The thriller of the Nephilim is the thriller of our own identity, a dark journey into the depths of a past that refuses to stay buried. We are the inheritors of a world built by giants, and it is only a matter of time before the earth gives up the rest of its secrets, revealing the true scale of the architects who came before us. The final chapter of this mystery has yet to be written. Every new excavation, every deep-sea survey, and every genetic breakthrough brings us closer to the truth. The conflict will persist, and the risks will remain, but the allure of the unknown is too strong to resist. We will keep digging, keep questioning, and keep looking into the shadows. Because in the heart of the dark thriller that is our history, the most terrifying and exhilarating prospect is that we might finally find what we are looking for, and in doing so, we might finally understand who we really are. The giants may be gone, but their echoes are everywhere, vibrating in the stones and whispering in the soil, waiting for us to finally listen. The physical world is an archive that never sleeps. We might choose to ignore the oversized burial mounds or the 800-ton blocks, but they do not cease to exist. They are the physical anchors to a narrative that contradicts our own. When we look at the ruins of Nan Madol or the foundation stones of Baalbek, we are not just seeing ancient ruins, we are seeing the limits of our current understanding. The tension between what we see and what we are told is the spark that keeps this mystery alive. It is a call to look beyond the surface, to recognize that the history of humanity is not a single, straight line, but a complex web of rise and fall, of presence and disappearance. Every time a new Lidar scan reveals a city that shouldn't be there, or a DNA test reveals a branch of the family tree that we didn't know existed, the dark thriller of the Nephilim gains a new chapter. It is a story of survival, of legacy, and of the enduring power of the earth to hide its greatest treasures. We are a young species, perhaps younger and more fragile than we care to admit, standing on the shoulders of giants whose names have been forgotten. But as long as the stones remain, the story is never truly over. We are the detectives of our own past, and the evidence is scattered across every continent, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the light of discovery to finally chase away the shadows of the past. The risk of this journey is that we might find ourselves changed by the destination. To acknowledge the giants is to acknowledge that we are not the masters of history that we thought we were. It is to accept that there are forces and beings that move through this world with a power we can barely fathom. But within that risk lies a great opportunity, the chance to reconnect with a lost part of our heritage, to understand the true depth of the human story, and to finally face the giants that have been watching us from the silence of the stones for thousands of years. The world is calling us to remember. The question is, are we ready to hear what the earth has to say?